Welcome everybody to another edition of Virginia Wine and Song, the Virginia Wine Notebook YouTube channel where we talk about Virginia wine and we talk about music and every now and then something else, something kind of off to the side. I decided to shoot another video today on something else. I received some feedback on my list of movies from earlier this year where I counted down 10 of my favorite underrated films of the 1980s. So, because I'm a Generation Xer, the 1980s was a pretty significant decade for movies for me. Also, the video store boom that occurred during that decade, and in-home watching of movies on VCRs, VHS tapes, and beta tapes. If you remember Betamax. So I'm going to go through another list of 1980s films, and these are movies that are I wouldn't really call them underrated. I think I would call them more like lost classics, or movies that didn't get the attention they deserved. So I guess that could be underrated or overlooked. But some of these movies that are on this list are movies that I think have were acclaimed when they came out, but have been forgotten by a lot of people. So I'm going to concentrate on those. I actually picked one for each year. So each year of the 1980s will be represented this time, instead of having a whole bunch of movies from one particular year like I did in the last 80s video that I did. I have picked one from each decade, each year of the 1980s. So we're going to dive right in with 1980, and I'm going to try to go a little brisk with this countdown and not drone on too much about these movies as much as I'd like to. So we're going to start with 1980, and the 1980 choice is, to this day, a controversial movie. And the movie I'm talking about from 1980 is this one, Ordinary People. Now, the reason why it's controversial is because it won Best Picture that year instead of Raging Bull, which is considered to be the superior film and the movie that people adore. Raging Bull, to me, this is just my opinion, and I love Martin Scorsese, as you'll find out later in this countdown. I really have a hard time getting involved with Raging Bull. I find it to be very off-putting in many, many ways. This movie, on the other hand, is such a genuinely heart-tugging, emotionally wrenching film about an everyday family, an all-American family, grappling with tragedy. Tragedy in a different aspects of tragedy. Basically, it's the story about a family that's pulled apart because of the death of a family member, and what happens with the son, the surviving son, played by Timothy Hutton in this film, how he's grappling with the guilt that he has over this death of his brother, and the emotional roller coaster that occurs between him and his mother and his father, and also his psychiatrist. This movie is just, it's a masterpiece, and it's Robert Redford directed this movie. This is the first movie that Robert Redford directed, and we just lost Robert Redford recently. A couple of weeks ago, he passed away, and this is actually the first movie I thought of. I didn't really think about movies that he starred in more than I thought about movies that he directed. And this was the first movie he directed, and I think it's the best film of 1980. It's one of my favorite films of the entire decade, and I can watch it over and over because there's so many different things to kind of discover and rediscover. Just this basic, like I said, this everyday family. I wouldn't call them all American. They're upper middle class family members. But for some reason, no matter what your background is, what your religious beliefs are, what your income level is, tragedy can hit any kind of family, every family, and how families cope with it is explored in this film, and it's just an emotional. It packs an emotional wallop. And the closing moments in this movie between Timothy Hutton and Donald Sutherland, who we also lost a couple of years ago, Donald Sutherland, just blows me away every time I watch it. It's a great movie. I think it's better than Raging Bull. I think it's better than The Elephant Man. So call me, what you will. I will stand by this. Ordinary People, 1980. 1981, moving on. Ragtime. Now this movie came out and it got a lot of acclaim when it came out. And I remember when it came out in the theaters in 1981, and everybody was making a big deal about the return of James Cagney, who had been not seen in a film in 20 years. He had been missing from Hollywood films for 20 years. So he made his comeback with this film, and I think this was his last movie before he passed away. And I think he got an Oscar nomination. He may have even gotten the Oscar for this, I can't remember. But anyway, it's basically the story about America at the crossroads. There's a lot going on in this film. And it was adapted later into a Broadway musical, a very successful Broadway musical. But basically it's about America at a turning point in history, where a lot of things are happening at this time. African Americans were trying to eke out respectability, after the Civil War, in the decades following the Civil War. And that's the central focus of this film, about a black piano player in a ragtime band that is horribly wronged, and what he does to kind of basically as retribution. But there are other stories going on in this film as well. There's another story about a silent, a Jewish immigrant who becomes a silent movie maker, a very famous silent movie maker, and how the movies are kind of born. And there's another story about a upper class upstate New York family and how their family is torn apart by feminism in many ways, but also the relationship they have with Cole House Walker in this film. And I don't want to give too many surprises away. It's just, people don't really talk about it. I think the reason why people don't really talk about it that much these days is because it pushes a lot of buttons, and it's got a lot of, I don't want to say, it's not woke. I hate that term, woke. It's just, it paints a picture, a very kind of a bleak picture about America's race relations in the early 1900s. And even in a state that was part of the Union, New York State, how racism was permeating even the Union states following the Civil War, the decades after the Civil War. So it can be uncomfortable to watch from time to time, and a lot of the dialogue is also uncomfortable. But it's based on a lot of real historical things that happened, in actual history, they're actually put into this movie as sort of like a background. It's directed by Milos Forman, who made One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and he would later make Amadeus. But I think this is a real lost classic. It was released a couple of years ago on Paramount Blu-ray. It's a remastered Blu-ray from Paramount. It has not been given the Criterion treatment, and I don't know if it will, because like I said, it's kind of a controversial film now, because of its tone and some of its dialogue. Okay, so that's 1981. After two kind of somber movies, we're going to move on to something funny. 1982. And this is actually Ron Howard's, well, they say this is Ron Howard's first film. It is not, as a director. This is not Ron Howard's first film as a director. He also directed, I think, Grand Theft Auto, kind of a low-budget Roger Corman-like movie that he directed in the late 70s. Of course, in the 70s, he was known as Richie Cunningham on Happy Days, but this Night Shift was his first real kind of big-budget Hollywood movie, so people consider this to be his first film as a director. And it is hilarious. And need I say more about it? I mean, Michael Keaton's first movie was Night Shift. He plays Bill Blazowski. I can't even pronounce his name. Billy Blaze. And he just comes into this movie and he carries it. He just steals the movie. He steals it from Henry Winkler, who is the star of this film. Henry Winkler, of course, was the Fonz on Happy Days, and he was good friends with Ron Howard. And he plays totally against type. He's definitely not like the Fonz in this. He plays this nebbish morgue. He works at the city morgue in New York City, but he works the night shift, and there's really no supervision. And Billy Blaze, played by Michael Keaton, comes along as his co-worker, and they decide to try to get rich quick, and they decide to become a brothel or a call service, a call girl service. It's just, it sounds like it's kind of tasteless, but it's not. A lot of critics didn't care for this movie because of the plot. They thought the plot was kind of, I remember Siskel and Ebert, when they reviewed it on sneak previews, they didn't care for this movie. They just thought it was, the plot, they just thought it didn't have any, it wasn't classy. It wasn't supposed to be classy. It came out in the era of teenage sex comedies. It came out the same time that Porky's came out. And it was kind of lumped into that genre, and it's definitely not like that. It's not a teenage sex comedy. It's a sex comedy for sure, and it's got a lot of, some nudity in it, but it's actually kind of a wholesome film in a way, and it's almost like a Frank Capra film, and you can see why Ron Howard was later called kind of the modern day Frank Capra, because he made a lot of feel-good movies, and this movie is kind of a feel-good movie, even though it's a body screwball comedy, and it's even got a little bit of a subplot involving criminals, gangsters, but it's still very amusing, and I watch it every couple of years just for a great laugh. Night Shift, 1982. 1983. Okay, now we're on to Martin Scorsese. This is 1983, my pick for 1983. Kind of a lot. It's not really a lost classic anymore. I think it's been discovered now. The King of Comedy with Robert De Niro and Jerry Lewis. And one of the reasons I think it kind of developed a cult following over the last couple of years is because of its influence on some recent films, namely Joker, the movie Joker, directed by Todd Phillips, that featured Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker, Arthur Speck. I think that movie took a lot from The King of Comedy, and I think that movie also took a lot from Taxi Driver. Todd Phillips even admitted that he was inspired by Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy for the movie Joker that he directed, the first Joker movie. And Robert De Niro actually appeared in Joker as the talk show host. In this movie, The King of Comedy, he plays the guy who wants to be a talk show host. And he becomes very obsessive-compulsive about it. It's almost like a kind of a lighter version of Taxi Driver. It's about alienation in New York City. And the lengths that somebody will go to kind of fulfill whatever their mission is. And in this movie, it was basically becoming the #1 late night television talk show host. And Taxi Driver, of course, his mission was to basically free a young girl from her pimp. So, but urban alienation in the early 1980s, and this movie definitely has that. Jerry Lewis, he actually plays the big talk show host in this film that Robert De Niro's character kidnaps. And Jerry Lewis, from what I've read, he plays very close to himself, the way he really was in real life. Jerry Lewis is very similar in this movie. His character in this movie, Jerry Langford, apparently was very much like Jerry Lewis was in real life, from everything that I've read through the years. And Sandra Bernhard is in this, one of the few movies she made. She's a very quirky actress. She's a comedian, but she's got a very interesting screen presence. And it's off-putting to a lot of people. I think it's really quirky. I think she's really good in this film. This DVD, by the way, came out in the early 2000s. I think this came out in like 2003, 2004. Special copy of this, directed by Martin Scorsese. It's got a lot of good interviews on it, and it is, at the time when it came out, it wasn't talked about that much, but I think time has been good to this film, and it's one of my favorite Scorsese films. That's 1983. 1984, continuing with Robert De Niro. 1984, this is Once Upon a Time in America. I'm going to try to go a little quicker now. There's no other movie that Robert De Niro made that's quite like this. It's a gangster film. And yes, Robert De Niro has appeared in quite a few gangster movies through the years. But this is a very slow burn. And this is the director's cut, by the way. There were a couple versions of this movie that came out in 1984. One of them was a really heavily edited, chopped up, incomprehensible version that was released into the theaters. This is the long director's cut that was also released in the theaters later in 1984. And I think it's on par with The Godfather. It's basically about the Jewish gangsters. It's not about Italian gangsters. And Robert De Niro plays a very convincing Jewish gangster in this film. It also has James Woods. I think James Woods is actually the star of this film. Robert De Niro, of course, is the big name in this, but James Woods plays sort of like this, almost like Bugsy Siegel or Meyer Lansky type character. I think it's based on Meyer Lansky or Bugsy Siegel, one of those famous gangsters from this era. And it's a long film. The director's cut is over 3 hours. And you can watch it on a rainy Sunday afternoon and just get lost in it. I mean, even though it's 3.5 hours long, it doesn't seem that way because it's shot in flashbacks and it goes back and forth in time, very similar to The Godfather Part 2. And you're so engrossed in what's going on. And the set detail is beautiful. It's a beautifully filmed movie. Sergio Leone's last film. Of course, Sergio Leone was known for spaghetti westerns with Clint Eastwood. But he also made Once Upon a Time in the West, which is it's a classic western that featured Charles Bronson and Henry Fonda. This is Once Upon a Time in America, which is his take on The Godfather and historical backdrop gangster films. Once Upon a Time in America. It actually has Jennifer Connelly in a very early role. I think she was only 11 or 12 when she made this film. Maybe a little older, 13 possibly. Great movie all around. 1980, that's 1984. 1985, this is Mask, and I'm picking this one because this is the original DVD version of the film Mask, directed by Peter Bogdanovich and starring Cher and Sam Elliott and Eric Stoltz. And I actually got this on eBay because I wanted the original theatrical version. There is another version out there that's a director's cut, which I didn't want because I'm not a really big fan of director's cut, except for this, because this was really the version they put out, the version that the studios put out in the theaters in early 1984 of this was botched. It was a total screw up. So I consider this to be the director's cut. I believe is the real version of this movie, whereas the director's cut of Mask, he changes the soundtrack because in this version, the original theatrical version, Eric Stoltz's character, Rocky Dennis, the disfigured teenager in this film, a true story by the way. Bob Seger is all over the soundtrack for this, and the real Rocky Dennis was really into Bruce Springsteen, and the director couldn't get the rights to the Bruce Springsteen's music for this version. But this is the version that came out in the theater. This is the version that played on HBO. This is the version that most people remember who were around in 1985 who saw this film. It was Bob Seger that was all over this. And the movie is perfect as it is. Bogdanovich, he just went in there and said, now that I got the rights to Bruce, I'm gonna put all the Bruce songs in here now, including Born in the USA, which was a song that was released after Rocky Dennis died. So that made no sense to use Born in the USA on the director's cut of Mask, because Rocky Dennis wasn't even alive when that song came out. So anyway, that's the main reason. I love this movie anyway. It's a tearjerker. I think Cher should have gotten the Oscar for this. She didn't. She got the Oscar later for Moonstruck, but this was a movie that she just loses herself in this character of Rusty Dennis, who's this dedicated mother. She's kind of, I don't want to call her trailer trash. She's a biker chick. And Sam Elliott rolls into town, who is her former lover. He comes back into her life, and they're trying to bring up Rocky Dennis, who's got this horrible facial disfiguration, and he's totally inspiring. And even though he's got this rare disease, he never loses hope, and he just is a positive inspiration for everybody. It's just I don't want to call it a feel-good movie, but it is. It's a great movie. I think it's one of Peter Bogdanovich's best films, and again, the original version, not the director's cut. Okay, 1986. This movie is sort of like the Joker in the pack here. This movie is called Sherman's March, and this is actually a documentary directed by Ross McElwee. Ross McElwee. He made this film in 1985. It was released in the theaters in '86, and he set out to make a documentary about Sherman's march to the sea. General Sherman, who marched through the Carolinas and Georgia, he wanted to make a historical documentary, totally free of humor, a dedicated documentary about Sherman's march. but he got sidetracked with all these women that he got involved with, and he was trying to get in, you know, his mother was trying to push him into these different relationships with all these women. So he started filming his interaction with all these different women, and that became the documentary. So it wasn't, this movie is not really about Sherman's March, it's about his quest for love. I hate to sound, it sounds corny, but it's almost like a meta film, before meta was even a term. It's a documentary, but he's basically turns the camera on himself and shoots himself and shoots all the women he's interacting with. And these are very eccentric Southern women, you know, South Carolina, North Carolina, all over the South that where he's shooting this documentary that never, well, the original documentary he wanted to do never came to fruition. So he ended up making this movie about the search for lost love. The Improbable Search for Love, which is the tagline of this DVD. And this played in art house theaters for quite a while in 1986. I didn't see it in the theater when it came out in '86. I saw it later. I saw it as part of a film festival in the '90s, and I went out and bought the DVD. And it's a long film. It's over 3 hours. But again, you can watch it. You don't have to watch it all at once. You can actually watch it in different chunks, because all the women, each chapter of the film kind of deals with another woman he's involved with. And he also interviews people who are, you know, he comes across, the people in the South that he comes across. I saw one critic called this movie a romantic comedy as if a Southern gentleman version of Woody Allen would have directed. And that's a good way to describe this, because he's got the neuroses of Woody Allen. He's got the insecurities of Woody Allen. He's got the wry, dry humor of later Woody Allen films, but he's a Southern gentleman. So he's got the accent. So if you don't like Woody Allen films, don't be put off by that description. This is a really great film, and I don't know if it's currently available on DVD. I got it about 20 years ago on DVD, but it's one of the ones I really cherish in my collection. So now 1987, we got 3 more left. 1987, this is Tin Men, directed by Barry Levinson. And this is the second film in his quartet. And I'm going to call them quartet. Four movies he made about growing up in Baltimore. He's the Baltimore native, of course. Diner, Tin Men, and then he made Avalon, and then he made a film later called Liberty Heights. And now all those films were about growing up in Baltimore. This is my favorite of the 4 movies. The other movies are good too, but this one, I think the reason I like this so much is because it's got such a great, again, another kind of Frank Capra feel-good type thing, even though it's about 2 feuding aluminum siding salesmen. They have a collision in their Cadillacs at the beginning of the film. One of them is played by Richard Dreyfuss, and the other one is played by Danny DeVito. And both of them, by the way, were kind of like, Richard Dreyfuss was on his comeback. He had made a big comeback with Down and Out in Beverly Hills, which came out a year before this. And Danny DeVito, he was starting to make the move into movies. He was known for television, of course, but he was starting to make the move into movies. So to see these two go at it, they're kind of riffing on each other, they're insulting each other, but they end up in a love triangle involving Barbara Hershey. Barbara Hershey is a character who's married to Danny DeVito's salesman, aluminum siding salesman character. And then Richard Dreyfuss's character tries to get even by seducing Barbara Hershey and getting her away from Danny DeVito. And it sounds like kind of a heavy drama, but it's not. It's done with a lot of wit, a lot of pathos, and again, it's got a lot of heart. This film has a lot of heart to it. It's got a great soundtrack. The Fine Young Cannibals actually had a couple songs on here. One of them is called Good Thing, and that later became a #1 hit. 2 years after this movie came out, Good Thing by the Fine Young Cannibals was a #1 hit, but that song made its debut in this film. Shot in Baltimore, I believe, and there are a couple of scenes where characters are sitting around a diner, very similar to the movie Diner, and they're talking about television shows from the 1950s. They're talking about all sorts of random subjects, and the characters are great. They're played by Bruno Kirby. They're all salesmen. Bruno Kirby is in this. Seymour Cassel, of course, made a lot of movies with John Cassavetes. He's in this film. It's got just a lot of comedians in this film, and they're riffing on each other. Great movie indeed. Check it out. Tin Men, 1987. Okay, now we're up to 1988. This is actually this is a 4-pack. There are 4 movies in this pack. I'm not sure if you can see this DVD box very well, but this is the only DVD copy I could find of this movie that I'm picking is from my 1988 film that's been sort of like forgotten. And that movie is Vice Versa. Vice Versa with Judge Reinhold. And there were a couple of movies that were made in 1987 and 88 and even into 89 that were about body switching, about people switching bodies or young kids becoming grown-ups or vice versa. We had Like Father, Like Son with Dudley Moore and Kirk Cameron. We had 18 Again with George Burns. Of course, we had Big with Tom Hanks. The movie Big actually came out a couple of months after Vice Versa. Vice Versa came out first. And this is by far my favorite. Vice Versa with Judge Reinhold. And he plays an uptight executive of a famous department store chain. No nonsense, stuffed shirt, just a typical yuppie, kind of unlikable. He has a child, he's got a kid, he's divorced from his wife, so he's estranged from this kid, but he's got, he can be with this kid every now and then. He sees his kid, but anyway, they end up switching places. The kid is played by Fred Savage, who was on TV at the time. And they switch places, and why they switch places, you have to see the movie to find out. But of course, there's a magical force involved, and it's just another. Again, I'm going to say this again. Frank Capra, as a child, Judge Reinhold's character sees life through a different lens, and he becomes. He slowly starts to realize, what an unhappy person he is by taking over the body of his son. And then his son takes over Judge Reinhold's body, and that results in a lot of hilarious moments, really funny dialogue in this. The scenes where Judge Reinhold is playing, the kid, is uproarious. I mean, it's just Judge Reinhold's comedy timing in this is perfect. And it wasn't a huge hit at the box office, which is too bad because it's a great movie. And the other movies on here, I don't like as much. Holy Moses with Dudley Moore, I didn't really care for that. A Fine Mess with Ted Danson and Howie Mandel, I didn't care for that. And then The Freshman, that movie came out in 1990. That's not even an 80s movie. The Freshman I did see, which I thought was enjoyable. But Vice Versa is the reason I got this DVD, this 4-pack DVD, which was only $12.99 on Amazon. So it was worth it. $12.99, $13 basically for 4 movies. Even though 2 of the movies are not very good. Holy Moses and A Fine Mess are not very good, but The Freshman and Vice Versa are, especially Vice Versa. So now we're up to the last one, 1989. We're going to talk about Michael Keaton again. 1989. I'm not talking about Batman. The other movie he made in 1989, Michael Keaton, The Dream Team. And I think this is another movie sort of like Ragtime that kind of people don't really talk about that much because it's not politically correct. It deals with people who are mental patients basically, and they're in a home. I don't want to say an asylum, but they're in a home, and they're not violent criminals. They just have mental problems. One of them is a Jesus freak who actually believes it's Jesus. Peter Boyle plays a character who is a former ad executive who goes crazy, and he believes that he's become Jesus. And then you've got a clean freak, a real fastidious, uptight, clean freak who's obsessed with cleaning up everything around him. He's played by Christopher Lloyd, of course, very well known from Back to the Future and the TV show Taxi. And then you have a guy in here who doesn't say anything. He doesn't say anything at all. Played by Stephen Furst. He's a baseball fanatic, but he's basically mute. Well, all he does is recite sports broadcasts. So he's got some problems too. And then you got Michael Keaton, who is a pathological liar, and he also has a violent streak. And they're all in this psychiatric home. But they're taken to a baseball game, very similar to a key plot point in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. If you remember that movie, the characters in that end up going on a field trip in that film. This movie, which is sort of like a kind of a lighthearted comedy version of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, they end up going to a baseball game at Yankee Stadium by their doctor, and their doctor ends up getting mugged, and they're left kind of on the streets of New York on their own. They have to figure out how to find their doctor and get the doctor out of danger, because he actually is in danger after he gets mugged. And they have to become, like Michael Keaton's character says in this film, we better get sane real fast. And they have to, because they have to find the doctor, and they have to get themselves out of New York City without being arrested themselves. And there are some moments in this movie that are hysterical, especially by Peter Boyle. His character is one to see, because Peter Boyle up to this point was known mainly for drama roles. He wasn't really known for a lot of comedy, even though he was in Young Frankenstein. He played the monster in Young Frankenstein, so that was probably the only movie he did that was a comedy. All the other movies that Peter Boyle had appeared in were primarily drama. So in this movie, he really stretched his comic stuff. And he ended up becoming a TV star later on Everybody Loves Raymond because of his comedic stylings, I think, from this movie. And Michael Keaton, he's not as funny. He's sort of more of the straight man in this. It's definitely not the hilarious Michael Keaton we know from Night Shift. He's got a couple of good lines in this for sure. He's got one about the World Trade Center, the original World Trade Center. That's, again, he's a pathological liar, so he has a line about that that's kind of amusing. Christopher Lloyd is totally perfect in this. He's totally unlike Reverend Jim from Taxi. He's totally unlike Doc Brown from Back to the Future. He's totally unlike Roger, the villain he played in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He's like this guy who believes he's a doctor, but he's not. Anyway, The Dream Team is a movie that you don't really hear a lot of people talk about it. I think, again, because of its topic. A lot of people think it's distasteful, and it's not really making fun of these people with mental problems. It's really not. It shows them how, if they can really work together as a team, a dream team, they can do anything, including find their long lost doctor. So let's go back in time here. 1989, The Dream Team. 1988, Vice Versa with Judge Reinhold. 1987, we got Tin Men with Richard Dreyfuss and Danny DeVito. Sherman's March from 1986, this wonderful quasi-documentary directed by Ross McElwee. The original theatrical version of Mask, which you may have to find on eBay because I believe this is out of print. Again, Peter Bogdanovich, before he passed away, I think he said, I will only allow my director's cut to be available on Amazon. All the other versions I want pulled. Well, you can still find this on eBay. Find it on eBay if you have to. It's a used copy, but it's worth it if you love this movie as much as I do. Okay, 1984, Once Upon a Time in America, the original, the long version, the preferred international version, as they call it. 1983, The King of Comedy, directed by Martin Scorsese. Night Shift from 1982, directed by Ron Howard. 1981, Ragtime, directed by Milos Forman. And 1980, directed by Robert Redford, we have Ordinary People. So those are 10 movies from each year of the 1980s that I believe deserve a second look. If you've never seen them, they deserve a first look. I'm not really sure if any of these are streaming. I have a feeling The King of Comedy is probably streaming somewhere. Maybe Once Upon a Time in America is streaming somewhere, but maybe Ordinary People is as well. But I think a lot of these other movies they're harder to find for the reasons I explained in this video. So I hope you enjoyed this, and we will get back to talking about Virginia wine and music in the next installment. Thank you.